I've always loved preaching this first Sunday after Easter because the gospel is a killer. It's just wonderful. It's the post-resurrection event and everything is brand new. The whole world literally has changed. The old quid pro quo transactional world is gone. And Jesus is ushering in a brand new reality for those who believe it. Obviously, the disciples at first did not believe it, for they are in the upper room with the doors locked, and Jesus appears to them, and, well, if I were Jesus and my disciples abandoned me and left me to die all alone with nobody but my mother and little baby John the Evangelist, well, I'd be pretty ticked. I'd say, where were you when I needed you? But no, you weren't there. And yet, what's the first words out of his mouth? Ta-da! Well, not quite. Actually, he says, Shalom. Peace be with you. Que pasa? Que how's your pasa? All is well, and the disciples are overjoyed. There is no retribution. There is no condemnation. There is only forgiveness, and he's about to give them what he has. And today, given the situation in which we find ourselves, we want to say to him, can we have a little of that too? For we, like the disciples of 2,000 years ago, find ourselves locked up in our rooms, filled with fear for the future. If indeed the world is changing and will never be the same again, how are we to respond to it? And I believe his answer to us would be the same that he gave to his disciples. Believe. Dare to believe. The disciples lock their doors because they fear the authorities. If they killed Jesus, would they be next? We too are locking our doors because we are afraid of this pandemic disease which knows no boundaries. The disciples were filled with fear. We are filled with fear. What is the future going to bring for us? Will there be enough PPEs and ventilators to fight the disease? Will there be enough PPPs to keep us working? Will there be enough to go around? Toilet paper is out of stock, as are guns. Now what do we do? In the story, St. John tells us, in spite of the locked doors, Jesus appears. And the first thing he does after he reassures them that all is well and they are to be at peace is to show them his wounds, his hands and his side. These seem to be the proof of purchase that it is really he and has come out the other side from death to the fullness of life. By now, all of us have found ourselves wounded by so many things. We are licking our wounds and wondering what is next. And if we ever needed to hear anything, we need to hear his voice. Shalom. Peace. Right after Jesus did this for his disciples, he told them that as the Father has sent me, so I now send you. I'm giving you marching orders. You've got some work to do, and your work is to do what I've done. I'm going to breathe upon you and give you my very essence, my stuff, and you now too have the power to reconcile the world, to heal the divisions that have torn the world asunder, to usher in the kingdom of God. I'm giving you the power. Use it. Now, just as I have had to carry the cross, you are going to have to carry yours as well. St. Peter tells us in the second reading today that if we are to give birth to a new world, we are going to have to share our own part of the sufferings of Christ. But these are only to purify us, to prepare us for what is coming. And what is coming will depend on whether we dare to believe in his promises or not, whether we follow the path of fear or of love. The path of fear tells us to lock our doors, to batten down the hatches, to circle the wagons, because the enemy is coming toward us. The path of fear is a terrible motivator, and it works really, really well. How interesting that even after Jesus appeared to the disciples, the second week he shows up, the doors were locked again for fear. So he has to go through his whole speech again. But this time Thomas is there. And Thomas tells his compatriots that unless I can put my finger in the nail holes and my fist in his side, I'm not going to believe. And so he turns to Thomas and says, come here, touch the wounds, and do not unbelieve, but believe. And Thomas responds, my Lord and my God. Jesus is telling us today that we have to make a choice as well, the path of fear or the path of love. the path of faith, the path of trust. If he has indeed promised us that he will be with us forever, that if we open our heart to the other, we will not only get through this, but that we will also open a door to a future that resembles the kingdom of God. Now, just as the pandemic that we are suffering touches the entire world, so does the mercy and love of God for those who dare to believe transform everybody everywhere. No exclusions. This is a power beyond our comprehension. It is a power of faith. It is the power to believe. Therefore, it is universal. It is global. A few years back, we were inundated with the saying that we are to think globally and act locally. There's great truth here. The universal Christ, in his resurrected form, has reconciled the whole world. We just don't know it yet. And while we are mindful of the starving and sick children of Bangladesh, we are called to act with those right in front of us. Today, in the Acts of the Apostles, the baby community are given to the teachings of the apostles, the communal life, the breaking of the bread, and prayer. If we have ever had a time to do it, we have that time right now to pray. Do you want to affect the world? Pray. Do you want to usher in the kingdom of God? Then work with those who are right in front of you. One of the things we have heard about this disease is that it affects everybody equally. That's not true. It is always beyond my comprehension that those you would think who are least capable to carry the burden of the cross almost always have to carry the majority of it. I don't get it. Why do those who already are burdened by poverty are also now burdened by the disease much more than their numbers should indicate? Will their suffering allow us to open up our hearts and even our pocketbooks? You know, the early Christian community put everything at the feet of the disciples so that no one went without. Each received according to their need and gave according to their bounty. And there was more than enough to go around. Some of us most privileged to have a place to stay and food to eat are going to be getting a little bonus check meant to help those most in need. Is it possible that we can copy the early Christian community and take the one we receive if we don't need it and give it to someone who does? Right in our own backyard, we have the People's Resource Center and pads for the homeless and so many wonderful needs and things we could do. And if we dare to believe in the new world that is coming and the one who has conquered death is with us, well then, maybe we can do something about it. We've often heard the dictum that seeing is believing. I believe just the opposite is true. Believing is seeing. When we have the audacity of faith, when we dare to believe, the kingdom of God comes. And our holy work is to usher it in.